There's a specific kind of confusion that doesn't have a clean name, but almost every adult who has ever loved someone deeply has felt it. It's the confusion of looking at a person you thought you knew completely and realizing somewhere quietly in the back of your mind that you're not entirely sure who's standing in front of you anymore. Not because they did something dramatic, not because there was a single explosive moment where everything fell apart, but because slowly, without announcement, the person you fell in love with started becoming someone different. And the part that really gets to you, the part that keeps you up at night, is that you can't figure out when it happened or why. You just know that something changed. And you're starting to wonder whether what you had in the beginning was even real. If that's where you are right now, or if you've been there before, I want you to stay with me today. Because I think by the time we're done here, some things that have been sitting heavy in your chest are going to start making a little more sense. People changing in relationships is not a new thing. Human beings have been navigating this for as long as love has existed. But something about modern relationships makes it hit differently and hit harder. And I think that's worth understanding before we talk about the psychology of it, because the context matters. Modern relationships are emotionally exhausting because the tools that were supposed to make connection easier have, in a lot of ways, made depth harder. When everything is fast, when attention is fragmented, when options feel endless, when vulnerability can be performed on a screen without actually being felt, people lose touch with the slower, more patient work that real love actually requires. And that creates a kind of emotional shallowness that doesn't always reveal itself right away. It reveals itself over time. And by the time it does, you're already invested. Now let's talk about the psychology, because this is where it gets important. When two people first come together, there's something that researchers call the limerence phase. Most people just call it the honeymoon period. Your brain is flooded with dopamine and norepinephrine. You feel electric, hyper-focused on this person, willing to drive 2 hours to see them on a Wednesday, texting back in 30 seconds, making space in your life that you didn't even know you had. And here's the thing. In that phase, most people are genuinely presenting their best. It's not always calculated. Often they actually feel that version of themselves. The warmth is real, the effort is real, the attention is real, and you respond to it with your whole heart, the way any loving person would. But the chemistry shifts. It always does. That's not a flaw in love. That's just neuroscience. The brain cannot sustain that level of intensity indefinitely. What's supposed to happen in a healthy, emotionally mature relationship is that when the electricity settles, something deeper and steadier grows in its place. Comfort, consistency, a quieter kind of devotion that doesn't need to be dramatic because it's secure. Most people realize this too late, though, that the transition from that initial rush to that deeper stability is actually where you find out who someone really is. Because in that transition, the performance fades. And what's left underneath is the person's actual character, their actual capacity for patience, for respect, for choosing you when choosing you isn't exciting anymore. And that's where the change becomes visible. Because some people don't have that depth to fall back on. Some people were, without even realizing it, running on the high of the beginning. And when that high fades, they don't know how to love in the ordinary. They don't know how to show up on a Tuesday with nothing to prove and nothing to gain. And so they start to pull back. They become less present, less patient, less intentional. And you, because you are the kind of person who loves with consistency, you start trying to figure out what you did wrong. You start adjusting yourself, softening your edges, giving more, asking for less, because you're trying to get back to something that for them may have already run its course. Can I ask you something? Have you ever caught yourself saying, I just want things to go back to how they were at the beginning? Have you ever put so much energy into trying to revive something that you forgot to ask whether the other person was even putting in the same effort? Because that's one of the most quietly painful places a loving person can end up. Working overtime on something that only one of you is still truly committed to. There's a psychological concept worth knowing here, and it's called devaluation. It's most commonly discussed in the context of certain personality patterns, but honestly, elements of it show up in a lot of modern relationships, even without any clinical label attached. Devaluation is what happens after the idealization, after someone has placed you on that pedestal in the beginning, when they start gradually to see you as less interesting, less special, less worth the effort, and they communicate this not always through cruelty, but through indifference, through the slow removal of the things they once gave freely. This silent behavior says a lot about someone. When a person who once made you feel like the most important thing in their world starts treating you like a background detail in their life, that is not a coincidence. That is not just them going through something. That is information about who they are and how they love. And the sooner you're willing to receive that information, the sooner you can make a clear-eyed decision about what you actually want to do with it. Emotionally mature people understand this, that someone showing you less care over time is not a puzzle for you to solve. It is not a code you need to crack. You do not need to become more interesting, more attractive, more accommodating, more anything. When a person of good character loves you, they don't need you to constantly re-earn their attention. They don't need you to perform at a high level indefinitely just to maintain their basic respect. If you've been exhausting yourself trying to hold someone's interest who gave it effortlessly in the beginning, please hear me when I say this, that exhaustion is not love. That's anxiety wearing love's clothing. Now, I want to talk about something that doesn't get discussed enough when we talk about people changing in relationships, and that's the role of emotional safety. Many good people ignore this red flag. When someone they're with slowly stops being emotionally safe to be honest with, when they start editing themselves, when they start choosing silence over truth because they've learned through small, painful lessons that honesty leads to conflict or coldness or being made to feel like too much. Think about that for a moment. A relationship where you no longer feel safe to be fully yourself is not a relationship that's working. It's a relationship that's slowly compressing you. And the change you're witnessing in your partner might actually be happening right alongside a change in you, a quieter, less visible change where you are slowly becoming smaller to make room for someone who stopped making room for you a long time ago. There's also something I want to say about the way avoidant attachment plays into all of this, because I think it explains a lot of the confusion people feel. Some people, and there are more of them than you'd think, are genuinely capable of intense closeness in the early stages of a relationship. But when real intimacy starts to set in, when the stakes become real, something in them retreats. Not because they don't care, sometimes they care deeply, but emotional closeness triggers something in them that feels like threat rather than safety. So they pull back, they become harder to reach, and from the outside it looks like they've changed, when really what's happening is that you've gotten close enough to see the part of them they've always kept hidden, even from themselves. Fake love often feels real in the beginning precisely because for avoidant people, the beginning is actually when they feel most free. There's no real vulnerability yet. There's no dependency. There's no risk of being truly seen and found wanting. So they can be their warmest, most generous self and mean it fully. It's only when love starts to require something deeper that they disappear. And if you've loved someone like this, you know that the cruelest part is that they're not lying to you in the beginning. They're just unable to sustain what they started. And that inability, that emotional unavailability, is not something your love can fix, no matter how patient you are or how many times you choose to stay. A person who truly loves you will never make you feel like their warmth is contingent on how little you need from them. Real love doesn't shrink when you ask for more of it. Real love doesn't punish you for being human. And if you've been in a relationship where needing things felt like a burden you had to apologize for, where being emotional felt like a liability rather than something a safe partner holds gently, that's not a you problem. That's a compatibility problem. That's a character problem. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and honestly, even for them, is to stop pretending otherwise. So why do people change in modern relationships? Sometimes it's the chemistry shifting and revealing who someone actually is beneath the effort of the beginning. Sometimes it's fear of true intimacy driving someone to create distance disguised as disinterest. Sometimes it's devaluation, a pattern they've carried long before they ever met you. And sometimes, honestly, it's simpler and sadder than any of that. Sometimes a person changes because they feel like they already have you, and they stop doing the work because the work was never about love. It was about acquisition. And once they had you, the motivation disappeared. None of those explanations make the pain of it smaller, but understanding them, really sitting with them, can do something important. It can stop you from turning what happened to you into a story about your own inadequacy. Because you were not too much. You were not too needy or too sensitive or too loving. You just gave a real thing to someone who wasn't yet capable of receiving it the right way. The question now, the only question that actually matters going forward, is this: what do you want your love to feel like from here? not what you're willing to settle for, not what you're afraid you deserve. What do you actually want it to feel like? Because you are allowed to want a love that stays steady, a love that doesn't leave you guessing, a love that chooses you in the middle and not just at the beginning. That kind of love exists, and you don't have to keep dimming yourself down to hold on to someone who was never fully present to begin with. Give yourself permission to want the whole thing. You've spent enough time trying to be grateful for pieces of someone who should have shown up whole. If something in this conversation resonated with you today, it would mean a lot if you'd hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach the people who need to hear this most. And if Wise Heart Talks has ever given you a moment of clarity or made you feel a little less alone in what you're carrying, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. We take our time here, we go deep, and I think that matters. Drop something in the comments. What part of this hit closest to home for you? What did going through a change like this teach you about yourself? Your story might be exactly what someone else reading the comments tonight needed to see. I read them. They matter to me. Take good care of yourself. I'll see you in the next one.